What's up, everyone? My name is Spoonemore, and I'm going to be talking about how I use Protractor to build automated UI tests. So let's start off by talking about why I wanted to do this. So there are two reasons. Number one is I wanted to have a smoke test in place. And what that means is we have tests that go through and run every 5 minutes, sometimes faster, and they perform just a basic set of actions on the page that let us know whether or not the page is up or down. So that's one reason why we wanted to build them. The second is for functional UI tests. I'm the QA department for our company. We have 7 developers. There's a lot for me to keep up with. And one of the tests I have to run through involves about a week's worth of work for one person to do it. Well, this test can do it overnight. So that's another reason why I wanted to build the automated tests. And I'll talk about both of those. Another reason for wanting to test, wanting to use automation for functional tests is if you have a lot of data you need to test with. So if you need to loop through 1,000, 2,000 users and tests each, this is a way to accomplish that without having to spend a lot of man hours. So you may think you have unit tests, you don't need this. Well, the thing about unit tests is they're only testing that specific part of the code. It's not testing the server and the interaction with the browser. What these tests are actually doing is launching the browser as the user, clicking on things as the user would. If there's a server down or a router down or something down, you're going to know because that test is going to fail. So to get set up and installed is pretty simple. You just install Node, and then there's some command line statements you need to run to install, npm install Protractor, and then webdriver-manager/update. The rest of the commands are what you use to kick off the tests, and this is the part where I'm going to switch over to code to show how we set them up. Actually, one more here. So the config for Protractor, these are the only options you need to set up for the config file. There's 2 files involved with the Protractor test, a conf.js and a spec.js. The conf tells the test what to test and how to test it. So this conf here is set up with the default. I've added a couple of things that I'll show now in the tests that I'm going to be showing today. This onPrepare function just maximizes the browser window and tells it that the app that I'm testing is not Angular. Protractor is made for Angular. If it's not an Angular app, the test is going to fail. If you're not familiar with Angular, there's just, there's things involved with waiting for calls to come back and things like that, and Protractor kind of handles that for you automatically. 99% of our apps are Angular. That's why I chose Protractor. You can use Selenium or something like that to do the same thing. So this is the configuration file that we have set up. And then now I'm going to switch over to the spec file. This is where the actual test takes place. And the commands are pretty simple. It's once you learn kind of how to find objects on the page, it gets pretty simple. So you can see here we're starting off with a browser.get. That's going to, and just to explain what the C2Spoon.net is, I wanted to show a test in process, but I couldn't show any of our apps because we're in the healthcare industry. So a shameless plug for my website where I teach people how to grow their own food. So anyway, so we're launching here. We're going to the website, and then we're checking the title just to make sure it says "Grow Your Own Food." So to kick the test off, I'm going to come down here into the terminal and kick off WebDriver. And WebDriver is just the component that kind of drives the test. On a server environment, or how we have it, WebDriver is always running, so you wouldn't have to run this each time. So I kick that off. And I'm going to launch another window now, and just protractor conf.js. That's the only command you need to kick off the test. So that's reading the conf file. The conf file says there's a test here, the spec.js, so it loads this, and then it performs the test. So I'll kick that off to show. So you can see here it launches the browser, verifies the main title, and then closes. You can see 1 spec here, 0 failures. So now I'm going to add a little more complexity to this test. So now what we want to do is make sure that whenever it clicks on a button here, that the next page is loaded correctly. So in finding elements, I found that the easiest way to find elements is by either using the ID of the element or by using CSS. There's some other tools that make finding by CSS easier, and I'll talk about those here in a bit. But I'm going to look for this button here just by... I don't have a browser. So I'm going to look for a button on the page and then verify the next page loads. So I'm going to kick this test off now. And you can see it clicks on the button. It better click on the button. It did. Okay. And it loads the next page, and there it goes. Now, just to back up a little bit, before I started this, I had no prior development experience. So if you're in QA and you feel like you need to get an automation, but you're kind of scared of it and you've never done development work, do not be scared. I mean, I was able to pick this stuff up pretty quick, and a lot of this stuff is written in plain English, as I'll call it. So there's not a lot of development that you really, I mean, I read a JavaScript book and that kind of gave me the knowledge I needed to be able to plug this stuff in. And I relied on a lot of my coworkers. I want to mention that as well. My team was very helpful in helping us get this off the ground. So this next test, you can see it clicked on a button. Now I want to show how you can interact with elements on pages, because oftentimes you want to enter data into fields, you want to click on other things, you want to verify things happen the way that they're supposed to. That's then a good test should go through and enter data anywhere you can and verify that all of that works. So I'm going to uncomment this part out now. And what it's going to do is it's going to enter, you see here, send keys into the username field. It's going to sign up for an email list on my site. That's what this test is doing. So it's going to send in username, email address, and then it's going to click submit, and then it's going to make sure that the text on the page actually changes to say thank you. You know, it's been submitted. Everything's good. So I'm going to kick the test off again. So it ran the first test. Now it's going to go back to the home page, scroll down, enter data into there, and you can see it was submitted. So this is just the scratch of the surface of what you can do with automated testing. Some of the tests we have run for up to 10 minutes, and they're going through and they're entering data all throughout the form. They're verifying all the data that went in is correct. I mean, they're doing some pretty complex stuff. I want to talk a little bit more about what you can do to enhance some of these tests. So what I showed was pretty simple here. And one thing I want to mention is this Protractor cheat sheet here is a huge help. It lists all the different ways you can find selectors and things like that. So if you want to do this, I definitely recommend that cheat sheet. Just Google Protractor cheat sheet, it's the first result. Again, finding elements, it's easiest by ID or CSS. Whenever you get into other methods, you can deal with a lot of multiple elements that have the same identifier, which you can handle. You can see like here, if you have 3 elements on the same page, all have the same identifier. There's nothing unique about those. You can just grab them all and then just loop through, you know, and do a get on that. So some other things we've added, multiple browsers. So in the config file, you can add this simple little statement here to test multiple browsers. So we try and do our tests in Firefox, Chrome, and IE, because most of our users are in IE, unfortunately. If you want to add screenshots, there's a plugin for that as well. We have ours set up so that whenever a test fails, it sends an email alert to whoever wants to receive it, and then you can click on a link from there to go into the TFS location where we have all these screenshots and everything from the test. So, you know, on a Sunday, if we have a test fail, I can get an email, click on it, and go in and see what failed without having to go to my computer, you know, boot it up and get logged in to see what it is. I can see, okay, yeah, it was just a timeout or whatever. Which is another thing to mention too. All these tests are configured with a certain timeout. So I have it set to where if the test takes longer than 30 seconds, that's a fail. Because if it doesn't respond within that amount of time, that's an issue. I consider that a failure. So, and then the test data files, that's important for if you want to be able to integrate this into TFS or Jenkins or wherever else that you do this kind of thing. We use TFS for ours, and this is what handles the handoff from the screenshots from the test into TFS. So another thing I want to talk about, you showed me kicking off the test manually or after running a command. Well, obviously that's not how you want this thing to run. You want it to kind of run on its own. There's a couple of different ways for doing that. We use TFS, again, because that's what we use for everything. And in order to get that set up, we had to build another custom solution to go with that. There are scheduled build options in TFS, but you have to hard code them to certain minutes. So imagine having to go in for a day and literally creating a build or a step for each 5-minute interval of the day. That's not very smart. So we built Hangfire, or Will here built a solution using Hangfire that loads up our builds in TFS and then runs them on a schedule. Another option that I've seen people use is Jenkins and Grunt. Here's a link to a blog post that talks about how to do that. The TFS options, I want to show those briefly and include them in the presentation. I'll upload these. I have a link at the end to where these are uploaded. But if you want to do this, these are the options that we have set up for the TFS build. There's 4 different steps that you set up. And then our Hangfire instance is the one that launches these builds. And this is the scheduling I mentioned. So you can see here, if you want to have one every 5 minutes, you've literally got to create one, which I did once for one, just to test it out and see it worked, but I don't want to do that each time. So more resources on this. Pluralsight is where I learned a lot about this. There's a really good video from Nate Taylor that talks about how to do this. My slides are up here on SlideShare. Protractor Test is the website for the main, for the project. It has a lot of good information. And then I mentioned earlier the ability to find elements a little bit easier, especially the CSS elements. This is a plugin here called Elementor, written by one of the developers for Google. that it's for Chrome, and it makes it to where you can right-click on an element and then inspect, and there's an extra tab down in DevTools where it gives you the locator that you can plug into Protractor. So especially when I was first starting learning all this, that really helped a lot because I didn't quite understand how, did I break some? Okay.